Hello, all. As me, your humble narrator, back from the dead, as it were, or at least mostly. I've still got a little touch of this cold, but it's mostly gone, thank goodness. I want to do a review of the television series of The Planet of the Apes, which was from 1974, and which I saw when it was first on in 1974. I was 15 at the time, and quite enthusiastic about all things Planet of the Apes. I loved all the movies. I went to the Go Ape event where they repeated all of them and actually sat through all five of them in one day a number of times, not just once. Um, Liked the cartoon, liked the comic books. So when the TV series came out, I was very enthusiastic. Unfortunately, it was canceled after only 14 episodes, mainly due to low ratings based on where CBS put it in the lineup. They put it on the quote-unquote Friday night death spot, and that's from Friday night from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. The reason it is referred to as the death spot is Friday night is date night. No, very few people from teenagers to middle age are home on Friday nights at 8 o'clock to watch things. And those who were home were watching Sanford and Son and Chico and the Man, which were right next to, opposed to Planet of the Apes. That and something of an inconsistency in the writing and in the storylines, I think, contributed to the early termination of the series at only 14 episodes. I have recently rewatched most of them on YouTube, though the first episode, Escape from Tomorrow, is not available. I'm not certain what the reason is, though I have a hunch there is a rumor that Disney, who now owns the rights, of course, since they took over Fox, is planning on making a remake. And they may be holding that back from the public to study it, to decide what they're going to do with the remake if it ever gets made, which is an open question at this point. The series was interesting, and I went back to do a little bit of research. Rod Serling originally wrote two episodes simply titled Episode 1 and Episode 2, which were not made. But the various elements of them were taken and used in later shows. In his original script, two additional astronauts from Earth named Colonel Alan Verdon and Dr. Stanley Kovac crash another spaceship onto the quote-unquote Planet of the Apes. They think it's somewhere out in Cassiopeia, and then later they start speculating, because of some of the similarities between the planet they're on and Earth, that this might be Earth in some distant future. They have been sent out to find Taylor and what happened to him and his companions. They find 4 graves, and Taylor and 2 other humans and an ape are buried in those graves. And the ape turns out to be Dr. Zira from the first movie. They discover a hostile gorilla and his quote-unquote police security force named Ursus, and a friendly chimpanzee who Kovac accidentally shoots, and then he heals him and he helps him get better because he's a doctor. And he doesn't care that he's an ape. He's a doctor. He's going to help anybody he can help, and he didn't shoot him on purpose, just kind of out of a fear reaction. And Galen eventually speaks and lets them know who he is. He's a scientist, and he's not interested in turning them over to the security police. He wants to help them. Believes them because he's been inside their spaceship. Their story about coming from another world, and wants to help them get back there. Meanwhile, the gorillas come and basically trash the entire side of the spaceship. Now they're going to have to look for parts to repair it. They go off and start looking for people, and they can't really find anybody. Are eventually captured by the gorillas and interrogated by both Ursus and Dr. Zaius from the first movie. Who's curious as to know, who are you? Where'd you come here for? What are you going to do? And they're now captives, along with Galen, who's looked at as sort of a traitor because he helped them. And they eventually escape, and they're let go, basically, by Dr. Zaius, who basically overrules Ursus's desire to kill them because they're humans, and humans aren't trustworthy, according to them. The second is a little bit of a conglomeration of the TV series and the second movie, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, where they find a hidden sort of secret society. Ursus has a son named Zonda, who is 15 years old and is very enthusiastic, wants to go out and hunt humans, but he's not very bright, also apparently not a good shot. And he's on this hunt, and Verdon and Kovac and Galen are amongst the people who they're chasing. Zonda is wounded when Kovac hits him in the head with a rock, and then he, again, because he's a doctor, he feels compassion. He wants to save him from dying, from bleeding to death, so they take him with them, yeah, albeit he's unconscious. And they're saved by somebody they don't see, who have bow and arrows, but they don't have any rifles. And they find, to their amazement, as they're trying to find these people, a subway tunnel that leads into a subway track, and there are electric lights, and there are humans down there, but they're sort of primitive humans who have gone back to bows and arrows and rocks, and that's all they have. They don't have rifles or sophisticated weapons, and they only have, primitive clothing. But they've set up sort of a courtroom in this subway car, which is not operational, but still exists. And Verdon and Burke are interrogating them, and they say, they show sort of a reverse picture. They hate, as apes sort of hate all humans in this world, they hate all apes. They don't trust them. They want to kill Galen and Zonda, and Verdon and Kovac, I'm sorry, his name is Kovac in this script, try to convince them not to. Instead they put them on trial, and rather cleverly, Galen asks to speak, and he uses Shakespeare's "The quality of mercy is not strange speech," and tries to convince them that they haven't done anything. Neither of them has actually ever killed a human, and they're put on trial for murder, but they didn't do any of the things they're accused of doing, and eventually they let Zonda go, and they let them go. And for some reason in this script, Ursus decides not to go after Verdon Burke and Verdon Kovac, I'm sorry, and Galen. And he says there's been enough killing, and he's just glad that he has his son back, basically. That contrasts with the character who later became Urko, who was played by Marc Lenard in the series, who is basically just a ruthless police chief. He's corrupt, he gambles, he takes bribes, he looks at all humans as inferior and will not be dissuaded even by Counselor Zayas, who is in this series not the same person, obviously, as Dr. Zayas, because it takes place 900 years before the first movie, which is kind of an interesting there's an interesting thing about the timeline. In the for establishing episode Escape from Tomorrow, the astronauts who are named Verdon, now Colonel Alan Verdon and Major Peter Burke, instead of Dr. Kovac, but he is a doctor also, and another astronaut just known as Charlie, who was killed in the crash, so we don't get to know too much about him. Crash on again the Planet of the Apes, don't know where they are, and they're pursued by apes and arrested and questioned, and one of these people is Counselor Zayas, who is also an orangutan scientist like Dr. Zayas and is interested in them. They find out there's a sort of an ancient book that has some secret knowledge about their world, and kind of proves that what they're saying is true. But of course, Dr. Zayas doesn't want this information disseminated because he likes history the way they think of it, that the apes were always superior and there was no previous human civilization. They don't like that idea, so they don't want to propagate it amongst their people because they think they'll rebel. Ursus, who is now Urko, played by Marc Lenard, who most people know as Sarek from Star Trek, is again opposed to any, to letting them go, and he even wants to, I think, kill Galen for helping them. Galen's just a scientist who they run into, and he's a chimpanzee, and played again by Roddy McDowell. Of all the three roles that he played, Cornelius in the original movies, and his son Caesar in Escape and Battle, and Galen, Roddy McDowell says he liked the character of Galen best, and I sort of know why. Galen is given a lot more freedom than those other two characters were given. Cornelius was sort of fixed. He was a scientist. He was interested in pursuing the truth, even if that truth was quote-unquote dangerous to the thoughts of the ape society. Caesar was a rebel leader who wanted to, see the rise of the Planet of the Apes, and does in the last two movies. Galen is kind of a sneak. He's a liar. He's a thief at times. He can be deceptive. He's very compassionate, and he has compassion for both humans and apes, which comes through in all of the episodes. Roddy McDowell did a really terrific acting job. The other major characters, Alan Verdon was played by Ron Harper, who did a lot of TV series. James Naughton is Peter Burke, and Booth Coleman played Counselor Zaius. And as I said, Urko, the chief of the guerrillas in the security force, is played by Marc Lenard. Unfortunately, they didn't. It was broadcast originally from September 15th to December 20th, 1974. Most of it was shot in Malibu State Park, where the original Planet of the Apes movie was shot, and the city scenes were all filmed on the Universal, or the MGM backlot, I should say, mostly on what's called the Old New York Street. I'm not going to go over all the episodes. Again, I've mentioned that there's some inconsistency in the timeline. Apparently, they left, Verdon and Burke left on a mission for Alpha Centauri on August 15th, 1988, and they arrive on June 15th, 3085, 1105 years after they took off. It takes place on the West Coast, not the East Coast, as in several episodes we see the ruins of both San Francisco and Oakland, including a ruined BART station in The Legacy, or The Trap, rather, which is one of the good episodes. The computer technology that is shown is 1970s style computer technology with old tape computers, and that's a little bit anachronistic now, but it was fairly realistic at the time. As I said, there's a lot of differences. For one thing that I found interesting, there is no mention of the lawgiver in this series. Apes do kill apes. There is no constriction against apes killing other apes. It happens quite often. A lot of apes are corrupt and take political bribes and trade, offices and power for, human slaves, etc. One of the differences, dogs still exist. And as we know from the movies, one of the reasons that is given for why the apes rose to prominence is there was a disease that wiped out all dogs and cats, and humans wanted pets, so they started taking monkeys and chimpanzees and orangutans and gorillas as pets and training them to do simple tasks. And that apparently has not occurred in this version of things. They also mention their gods. Both humans and apes seem to be pantheistic. They don't ever mention who these gods are, but they do mention that they both worship gods, more than one. So that's kind of an interesting contrast with some of the things in the movies. The good episodes, I'm not going to list all of them. I'm not going to go over any of them in particular detail, but there are certain ones that stand out of the 14 that were produced. The first one, Escape from Tomorrow, was very good. Good special effects. The makeup effects were terrific throughout the entire series, and the costume effects were really good, equal to any of the movies. And I should note that each of these episodes cost $250,000 to produce, which was very expensive in the 1970s. That may be another reason why it was canceled. It was too expensive and it wasn't making enough money back. The good episodes, like I said, I like the Trap, in which Urko and Verdon are walking through the ruins of San Francisco. Verdon's trying to find computer technology, and he wants to try to reread the ship's data recorder, which is a little disc, to find out what happened and how they got there and how they can get back to where they started. They fall through a hole when there's an earthquake, and a hole opens up, and then a piece of a building collapses on top of it, so they're trapped. Where they're trapped is interesting because it's Burke and Urko who are trapped, and they are trapped in an old BART station and Sutter Street station apparently, and there's a ruined BART train and some electric lighting that is still working because it's solar powered. There are posters for things like instant food pills and organ transplants. Also a poster that Burke doesn't let Urko see, which is a poster for the San Francisco Zoo. It says, "Bring your kids to the zoo," and it's got a picture of a kid feeding a gorilla through the bars of a zoo, and he does not want Urko, obviously, to see that. Because, for one thing, it proves that there was a human civilization before the ape civilization, and that they looked down on apes as animals. And he does not want that idea to get to Urko, who would be very upset. Later, he recants the idea that there was that all this was built by humans, and says, no, it was built by apes, to save his life, basically, because Urko's going to kill him. And eventually, they work together. They put up a ladder, and they're going to try and get out of the hole. And meanwhile, Verdun has convinced some of Urko's troops to help him get Urko out by creating a sort of a fulcrum, and they're going to have the horses pull the fulcrum and lift the stone that's fallen over them to get them out of the tunnel. And there's some interesting things in there in the end, including what happens to the zoo poster, which I thought was interesting. The Legacy is a great episode with a boy played by why is the name? I can't remember. But Jackie Earle Haley, I'm sorry, played a boy, and then there's this beautiful girl, and they're kind of trying to deceive Verdun a little bit into like looking at them as sort of a family, and that's Zaius' idea. Again, Ursus just wants to kill him, but he has this idea that they can get to him through this boy. And they find a old computer inside a building in Oakland, the Oakland Science Institute. And there's a hologram, and the hologram is a man dressed like the people from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. And he tells them that the scientists of the world knew that the world was coming to an end. World War III was about to happen. And they hid scientific knowledge in various vaults, but the power dies on the computer before he can say where the vault in Oakland is hidden. They can't, they haven't found out. They have to construct a battery now using very primitive, resources. They're going to construct basically a sulfur dioxide battery with copper wires, and they're going to try and hook it up to the machine and get it to work again so they can find out where the vault is. Meanwhile, Verdun is captured and is trapped with these two other humans, Jackie Earle Haley and this blonde woman. I didn't write down what the name of her, Kathleen Bracken, I think, was who played her, a very beautiful girl. And he does start to feel sympathy towards him. He starts building a model airplane for the kid, and the kid is basically a snitch. She's been hired by the guerrillas to worm secrets out of Verdun. And so that's why they haven't captured him. And he's kind of resentful. He like smashes the airplane and says, "I hate you," and runs off. And he doesn't like these stories he's been telling him about the old world. All he wants is food, and the girls have promised him food if he thinks on Verdun and tells them these secrets that he has. And so he does at various points. But eventually, they do get Burke does get the battery working, and he gets the message from the elder as to where the vault is. It's in a train station in Oakland at Terminal 4, and underneath track number 4, and he's intercepted before he can go find it. And Jackie Earle Haley says, "I know how to get there," and he and Verdun and his mom go see the vault, and it's got old style computers with tape printouts and like Burroughs type tape computer wheels, but it does in fact contain scientific knowledge. Then they're intercepted by the guerrillas, and they have to run and hide. And amongst the guerrillas is also Dr. Zaius, or Counselor Zaius, I should say, the ancestor perhaps of Dr. Zaius, who says, burn it all. And the guerrillas are saying, why? This can give us technology. This can give us an advantage. He says, yeah, and it can help you destroy the world just like the humans destroyed theirs. No, don't do it. It's evil. Destroy it. And Ursus agrees, and they burn the vault, which deprives Verdun of his plan to find a way to get back home. Very good episode, very well directed, very well written, very tense and interesting. Another good episode was called The Good Seeds, where they go into, most of the world is rural. There are very few cities, except for this, what's known as the Central City, and the ruins of Oakland and San Francisco. There are very few cities. There are mostly rural towns. And Verdun, Burke, and Galen end up on a small farm where the son of the farmer is waiting for the delivery of a bull calf from his cow. He resents them coming because he thinks that humans curse cows, and that they slept in the barn, and that now the cow's going to die, or the cow's going to have a girl calf, which he doesn't want. If he gets a bull calf, he can have his own farm. You have to have a male calf to be able to have your own farm, apparently, according to the ape law. And so he's kind of opposed to them. He keeps wanting to turn them in, but the father doesn't, and the father is compassionate and listens to some ideas that Verdon has. Verdon was apparently a farmer back on Earth, and teaches them how to do some terrace farming and how to get some better crops. And he and the wife ape are also, more sympathetic. And then eventually, because he was a doctor, Burke rather, is able to, or no, it's Verdon, because again, he worked on a farm, is able to deliver the calf, which is, it's going to be a breech birth. It's turned around inside the cow, and he manages to correct that, and it's actually twins. It's two male calves that are born, and now the son is ecstatic, and he agrees not to turn them into the gorillas. He makes up some goofy story about how it wasn't a human that they saw in the shower that they made, it was him, and he was in face makeup, and he was making fun of humans, and he does that in a kind of a comedy bit, and the gorillas laugh, and they agree that there are no humans, and they let him go. That I thought was a really good episode, very well acted. Another good episode is called The Deception, which starred Joanna Barnes, and it's about a blind girl's father is apparently killed by humans, and she is now, hates all humans and wants to kill them. And the local magistrate says, no, we'll do things my way, I'm the law here. But her uncle and some others band together, and they form this outlaw band called the Dragoons, who hide their faces behind masks, sort of like the KKK, and that's obviously kind of a reference to that. And they go out and kill humans illegally. No one can identify who they are because they're wearing masks. And in order to find out who's doing this, Verdon and Burke suggest that Galen infiltrate the Dragoons and pretend that he hates humans too, and he wants to kill them, and then they're going to find out who they are and report it to this magistrate so he can go and arrest them. Things don't go exactly according to plan, but basically that's what happens, and the magistrate puts an end to it. But it turns out, the girl is starting to fall for Burke based just on his voice. She's blind; she can't see him. When she asks to see his face, he lets her touch Galen's face. She says, "Oh, you're a strong girl, and a strong chimpanzee, just as I thought you were." He tries to tell her about a story from the Bible about Esau and his two sons, and how one of them deceived his father to give him a blessing by pretending he was the other. And he says it was deception, but it wasn't done to hurt anybody. She doesn't quite know what he means by that yet. And like I said, she's starting to fall for him. He has to, of course, eventually let her know that he's a human. And when he does, she's very horrified, but by that point, he and Verdon have realized that it's not her father was not killed by humans because he was friendly to humans. They discovered his diary, and his diary is talking about meeting with humans and trying to work things out. So she's been lied to, and eventually, when they're confronted by the magistrate, there's a gorilla. The uncle and one of the other gorillas confessed that they killed her father because he was cooperating with humans, and they didn't like that, and he wouldn't listen to them. Even after she learns that, when she finds out that Burke is a human, she is horrified and says, "How could I ever have fallen for a human?" Which sort of shows that the prejudices on this planet run very deep, and even love can't really penetrate this prejudice that's built in to their society. I thought that was a very well done episode. Other good episodes, The Tyrant was a really good episode. It has to do with gambling and things. I'm not going to really go into that. The Horse Race, another gambling episode, which is interesting, about Urko's character, or rather his lack of character. Up Above the World So High, which is the final one, was about the idea that a human had invented a glider, and a scientific ape wants to basically take credit for it and say he invented it. But it's not viable. It won't fly the way that it should because the wings are not constructed properly. Verdon and Burke, who are both astronauts, know how to build a glider, and they build a better one, and they're going to let Galen fly it because they say if a human flies it, he'll just be shot. But what if they go look up and see an ape flying? They're not going to shoot an ape. So Galen is very terrified of flying, but he agrees he's going to do it. And there's a whole kind of a romance between he and a female chimpanzee until he learns what her plans are. She actually has some old boxes of U.S. Army fragmentation bombs, and she thinks that the gorillas and the orangutans are unfairly represented in council and are ruling the world, and that she's going to drop bombs using gliders at night so nobody can hear them or see them and destroy both Urko's council and the High Council chambers. And then the chimpanzees will take over. Well, Galen is horrified at this, and he instantly lets Verdon and Burke know about this plan of hers, and they go about sabotaging it. But he does eventually fly, and they end up flying away. And I thought one of the interesting things that even though their glider crashed, the scientist just gives up on the idea after that. After one trial, I thought that's kind of a weak plot point. Why would they keep... If they saw one successful flight, why wouldn't the apes keep pursuing it? They knew it worked, so why didn't they just try it again with ape technology? They just could have picked up the glider off the beach, studied it, and built another one. But they didn't do that. And obviously they wanted to show that this was just a corrupt individual, and she, I believe, gets arrested in the end by the gorillas because the experiment failed. Another good episode is... it's The Cure, which stars, of all people, Sandra Locke, who was very young and very beautiful at this time. She had not yet hooked up with Clint Eastwood. She hadn't done The Outlaw Josie Wales yet. She was very good, very convincing. She was always a terrific actress, and I always liked her. And I really particularly like her in this episode where an epidemic of malaria breaks out due to stagnant water and mosquitoes, and there's a conflict between a chimpanzee doctor named Kava and Urko. Urko just wants the village burned. Kava wants to try this cure that Verdon has mentioned, that they can make quinine from the bark of some trees, and they go gather the quinine, and they're going to make the bark. There's a great line by Galen who doesn't want to go back, and he's angry that Verdon told Amy, this character played by Sandra Locke, who he was and who they were. He told her we're from another world and another time. And Galen's upset about that. He says, "You're going to go back anyway, aren't you?" Once they find out that there's a malaria outbreak. And he says, "Yeah." And he says, "I think I'm getting to be no better than a human." I liked that line. It was well said and showed some depth to the character. There were some other, episodes that I didn't go into, but you can see, like I said, all of them except the first one. I don't know why, but you can't see that. It is, of course, on the DVD and the Blu-ray collections. Despite the fact that the show did not do well in the ratings, there were 4 novels written by, of all people, George Alec Effinger, a very good science fiction writer. The first was called Planet of the Apes, Man the Fugitive. The second, Planet of the Apes, Escape from Tomorrow. The third, Planet of the Apes, Journey into Terror. And the fourth, Planet of the Apes, The Lord of the Apes. I have not read those, but I will seek them out. There are also some comic books and other sort of fan fiction and things that tie in. There are some tie-ins with the cartoon, though I don't think they're really relevant. I think it was a good series for the time. Yes, it looks dated now. Some of the sets were really excellent. The set design, the decorations, the costumes, the makeup, the clothing, the wardrobe, editing, sound, lighting were all really excellent. The theme was written by Lalo Schifrin, who you may know as the composer of the Mission Impossible theme. And there are also a lot of echoes in the theme to Jerry Goldsmith's theme from the original Planet of the Apes. I highly recommend it if you have not seen it. It's better than the average 1970s science fiction television show.